RRF Caserta.
South Italy, in English language.
So, it is Friday, February 27, 2026. And if you've been, scrolling through the international wires today, you might be feeling a pretty serious case of cognitive dissonance.
Oh, definitely. It's a polite way of putting it.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's more like this geopolitical split screen where the audio track just doesn't match the video at all.
That is a perfect description because on one side of this screen, we have the drums of war beating louder than they have in years. I mean, we're talking massive U.S. naval deployments, airstrikes, and all this rhetoric about maximum pressure.
Right.
But then you glance over at the diplomatic cables coming out of Geneva, and there are men in suits shaking hands and talking about significant progress.
Which creates a massive paradox. Historically speaking, when aircraft carriers move into a region, the diplomats usually pack their bags and leave.
Right, they clear out.
Exactly. But today, they are both operating at full throttle, side by side.
So welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to try and, make sense of this contradiction. We've combed through a massive stack of reporting for you.
We've got the BBC, we're pulling from Italy's ANSA agency.
Le Figaro in France.
And Sky TG24. So a really global perspective.
And we're going to try to connect these dots. We need to figure out how a supercarrier docking in Greece relates to the price of vegetables in Tehran and the complete breakdown of order in Gaza.
Because the goal isn't just to list the events. Anyone can read a headline. We need to understand why these specific pressure points are flaring up right now on this specific Friday.
Right.
And whether the strategy behind them is actually working or if it's backfiring in a really dangerous way.
Let's start with the most visible piece of the puzzle, the heavy metal. The U.S. military footprint in the Middle East has changed pretty dramatically in the last 48 hours.
It really has. And we need to be specific about what buildup means here. It's not just about moving troops around. It's about power projection. We have the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier strike group arriving in the Middle East. That is a massive signal on its own.
Because that's a Nimitz-class carrier.
Exactly. It's basically a floating city of air power.
But the Lincoln isn't alone. This is the detail that jumped out at me from the Le Figaro and Sky TG24 reports. They're tracking a USS Gerald R. Ford as well.
Which is the newest, biggest, most advanced carrier in the entire fleet.
Right. It's been spotted mooring in Greece, but the trajectory is clear. I mean, it's heading toward the region.
Now, for context, for you listening who might not be a naval enthusiast, the Ford is a totally different beast from the Lincoln.
How so?
Well, it uses electromagnetic catapults instead of steam. It can generate a sortie rate that's the number of flights per day that completely dwarfs the older carriers.
Wow.
So putting the Ford in the Mediterranean while Lincoln is in the Gulf, that is a classic pincer movement.
It's basically putting Iran in a vice. Although Sky TG24 did mention a somewhat intimidating detail about the Ford.
Oh, right.
Something about the plumbing.
Yes, Bani and Tassati.
Clogged toilets.
Clogged toilets on a supercarrier.
It's a funny, very human detail. It sounds trivial, but it's a good reminder that these floating cities of 5,000 sailors are still just machines.
They break. But strategically, plumbing aside, the message to Tehran is totally unambiguous. This is the physical manifestation of what the Trump administration calls maximum pressure.
Okay, so the gun is on the table. In a standard game of poker or even in just business negotiations, you would expect the other side to fold or at least start sweating.
Right.
But the reporting from Washington suggests the reaction, or really the lack of reaction, is causing some genuine confusion in the Oval Office right now.
Confusion is definitely the right word. We have quotes in the stack from Steve Witkoff, the U.S. envoy. He's essentially saying that President Trump is puzzled.
Puzzled?
Yeah. He is genuinely curious why Iran hasn't capitulated yet.
Capitulated is a very specific, very strong expectation.
It is. It implies a total collapse of will. The White House theory seems to be, we show you the ultimate force, and you compromise immediately to save yourself.
It's a very transactional view of geopolitics.
Extremely transactional. But Iran isn't blinking. And this miscalculation, if we can call it that, is triggering a fascinating and honestly somewhat alarming debate inside the U.S. leadership.
You're referring to the friction between the political wing and the military brass.
Precisely. The BBC has highlighted a really stark warning from General Dan Kane. He's looking at this map, he's looking at the Lincoln and the Ford, and he's telling the president, be careful.
Because a strike isn't just a button you push. It's not a video game.
Right. General Kane's argument is that this isn't a surgical operation where you hit a target and go home.
Right.
If you strike Iran, given their proxy network and their missile capabilities, you are looking at a prolonged conflict. It's the difference between a punitive slap and a full-scale war.
And how is that received in Washington?
Well, the reports say Trump hit out at this assessment. He doesn't want to hear about the risks. He wants to know why the intimidation tactics aren't working. He's frustrated that the deal isn't happening.
Which brings us to the other side of that split screen we mentioned earlier. While General Kane is warning about a prolonged war, we have negotiators in Geneva and Vienna apparently making real headway.
This is the part that makes the analyst's job incredibly difficult today. You have the Iranian foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, quoted by ANSA, and this is a direct quote. He's saying they have made significant progress.
He even called the talks the most intense so far.
Right. So think about that. Are we on the brink of World War III, or are we about to sign a new nuclear proliferation agreement?
Is it possible this is just a coordinated good cop, bad cop routine? Like the carriers are the bad cop and the diplomats are the good cop?
That is the optimistic reading, certainly. You squeeze them militarily, so they sign the paper diplomatically. But it's a massive high-wire act.
Yeah.
If you squeeze too hard, you don't get a signature, you get an explosion.
Yeah.
The sources suggest we are at a tipping point where the outcome could swing wildly in either direction within days. One wrong move by a carrier or one intercepted missile, and the diplomats in Geneva become completely irrelevant.
And while the leadership plays this high-stakes poker with aircraft carriers, the concept of maximum pressure isn't just a geopolitical abstraction, it's landing on real people.
Absolutely.
I want to pivot to the reporting from inside Iran, specifically from Le Figaro and the BBC.
This is crucial. When we say pressure or sanctions, we often think of oil graphs or banking restrictions.
Numbers on a page.
Exactly. But what that translates to on the streets of Tehran is a cost of living crisis that is tearing the social fabric apart.
The BBC report was quite blunt. The headline was basically, people are getting poorer, but it's the granularity of that poverty that really strikes you. It's not just fewer luxuries, it's families unable to afford basic staples like milk or bread.
And historically, when the price of bread or fuel spikes in Iran, the streets erupt. It's a direct correlation. We're seeing a fresh wave of anti-government protests, particularly radiating out from the universities right now.
But the regime's response seems to have shifted gears as well. We're used to hearing about police cracking down on marchers.
Right.
But ANSA carried a report about doctors that really stopped me in my tracks.
That was a chilling detail. The report says the regime isn't just targeting the people shouting slogans anymore. They are arresting doctors and medical staff simply for treating the wounded protesters.
Which crosses a massive line, doesn't it? Even in conflict zones, medical neutrality is usually the very last norm to go.
It signals a regime that is terrified. If you are willing to execute a doctor, and some are risking execution according to the report, just for patching up a student, you have abandoned any pretense of governing by consent.
Wow.
It is ruled by pure, unadulterated fear. You're trying to remove the safety net so that protesting becomes a death sentence, quite literally, because no one will be left to stitch you up.
Amidst all this bleakness, though, the stack did offer one story of resilience. We have to talk about the motorcycling midwife.
Yes, Shaverdi, yes. This is the kind of story that reminds you that Iran isn't a monolith.
Right.
It's not just the Ayatollahs and the Revolutionary Guard.
The BBC mentions she's the subject of a new film that's actually tipped for an Oscar.
And look at the image the report paints. A woman on a motorcycle in a room of 1,500 men commanding respect and pushing for change.
Yeah.
In a society where women's rights are being systematically rolled back, she represents a total refusal to disappear.
And it connects back to the sanctions discussion. The population isn't just suffering passively. There's a vibrant, resilient civil society fighting for its own future, regardless of what the carriers or the leaders are doing.
Precisely. And that complicates the maximum pressure strategy. You aren't just squeezing a government, you're squeezing a population that is already fighting for its life.
Let's move west, across the region to the Levant. If the situation in Iran is a tense standoff, the situation in Gaza and the West Bank sounds like a complete breakdown of order.
Chaos is really the only word for it. We have Doctors Without Borders, MSF, issuing a statement calling the situation catastrophic.
And remember, MSF operates in war zones globally. They see terrible things every single day.
Exactly. When they say catastrophic, they do not use the term lightly.
And the violence hasn't stopped. ANSA reported fresh airstrikes, 5 dead, split between central and southern Gaza. But I really want to focus on the governance vacuum, or rather, the confusion about who is actually in charge there.
This is another major disconnect between Washington and the ground.
Yeah.
The Trump administration has this concept of a board of peace.
Right.
They've pledged $7 billion in relief. The narrative from the White House is that Hamas is on the ropes, they're ready to disarm, and this board will step in.
But the BBC reporting suggests the exact opposite is actually happening.
It does. The reporting indicates that Hamas is actually reasserting control. They're collecting taxes again. They're running municipal services. Despite the bombardment, despite the catastrophe MSF is talking about, the administrative structure of Hamas is rising from the rubble.
So you have a $7 billion theoretical plan for peace from Washington versus the reality of who is actually picking up the trash and collecting taxes on the street.
And the latter usually wins out.
Mm-hmm.
Governance is about who answers the phone when the water stops running.
Yeah.
You can't buy peace with a pledge if the other side is effectively running the government. It highlights a massive gap between the high-level political fantasy, that art of the deal approach, and the gritty reality of the territory.
Speaking of gritty reality, the breakdown of norms we saw with the Iranian doctors, we're seeing a parallel in the West Bank. There was a report in the BBC Stack about a 14-year-old boy.
This is a really difficult story to process, but it's essential to understand the level of animosity on the ground right now.
Yeah.
This wasn't just a casualty of crossfire. The report details that Israeli soldiers shot this teenager and then critically blocked the ambulances from reaching him.
For 45 minutes.
At least 45 minutes. He bled to death while help was sitting just down the road.
When you block an ambulance for a dying child, I mean, what does that say about the rules of engagement?
It says there are none, or at least none that are being enforced. It says that hatred has completely superseded professional military conduct.
It's a total dehumanization of the adversary.
Extending even to children. And that creates a cycle of vengeance that no peace board can fix with money.
And politically, the U.S. seems to be shifting its stance on the West Bank as well. There's a note in the stack about passport services.
Yes, the U.S. has decided to provide passport services directly within the settlements.
Why is that significant? Because on the surface, it just sounds like a boring bureaucratic update.
It's deeply symbolic. By offering official U.S. government services inside a settlement, you're implicitly recognizing that settlement as a legitimate, permanent part of Israel.
Okay.
The Palestinian Authority, obviously, calls it a complete violation of international law.
But the Palestinian Authority barely seems to be functioning according to these reports.
That's the other key point here. The sources describe the PA as being in dire straits, close to total collapse.
So if we connect the dots, the moderate leadership of the PA is crumbling, Hamas is regrouping in Gaza, and the U.S. is signaling that the settlements are here to stay.
That is a recipe for radicalization, not stability.
And just to add one more layer of geopolitical intrigue to the mix, Indian Prime Minister Modi is visiting Israel right now.
Which shows that despite the chaos, or perhaps because of it, major global powers are still jockeying for position.
Right.
India is testing its priorities, balancing its traditional non-aligned stance with a deepening relationship with Israel. Everyone is trying to secure their interests before the map changes.
We have one final flashpoint to cover. It's one that might be getting drowned out by the noise in the Middle East, but the implications are just as dangerous. We need to look at the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan.
This is the forgotten front that is suddenly heating up. And let's be clear, we aren't talking about border skirmishes. We are looking at state-on-state military action here.
Reports indicate overnight airstrikes by Pakistan into Afghan territory.
Specifically in Nangarhar and Paktika provinces. Now, Pakistan's narrative is very clear. They claim they targeted terrorist camps and killed over 80 militants.
80 is a very high number for a single operation.
It is huge. They frame it as retaliation for suicide attacks inside Pakistan. The message is, you harbor the people hurting us, so we will cross the border to get them.
But the view from Kabul, from the Taliban, is completely different.
It's a classic fog of war scenario. The Taliban deny the existence of these camps completely. They claim the strikes didn't hit terrorists, they hit civilians, women and children.
Which is a very different story.
They put the death toll lower, around 18, but emphasized the civilian nature of the victims.
And Sky TG24 noted that AFP journalists on the ground couldn't verify the numbers.
Verification in those provinces is nearly impossible right now. But whether it was 80 militants or 18 civilians, the diplomatic damage is done. Kabul has officially summoned the Pakistani ambassador.
So you have two neighbors, both heavily armed, Pakistan with nuclear weapons, and both dealing with massive internal instability.
And the border between them, the Durand Line, has always been porous. But when you start launching airstrikes across it, you are escalating a localized insurgency into a potential regional war.
Yeah.
It adds a layer of unpredictability to a part of the world that really can't handle any more shocks.
We've covered a lot of ground today. From the agency where the Ford is parking, to the grocery stores of Tehran, to the Hindu Kush. When you step back and look at this entire board, what is the through line? What connects the carrier to the midwife to the airstrike?
I think it's a story of disconnect, a massive disconnect between the official narrative and the ground reality.
How so?
Well, look at the pairs we've discussed. We have a board of peace pledging billions,
Right.
while Hamas is physically retaking control of Gaza.
Right.
We have significant progress in nuclear talks,
Yeah.
happening under the shadow of the most advanced warship in the world moving into attack position.
Yeah.
We have governments claiming to fight terror, while ambulances are blocked and doctors are arrested.
It feels like the strategies, whether it's maximum pressure or peace through investment, are operating in a total vacuum, like they are ignoring the human and political mechanics actually driving events.
That is the danger. You listening should really take this away. While the headlines focus on the personalities, Trump, the Ayatollahs, the generals, the real history is being written by the unintended consequences on the ground.
The economic desperation in Iran, the administrative vacuum in the West Bank.
Exactly. History is written by the price of bread and the ability to collect taxes, not just by treaties and threats.
Which leads to the big question we want to leave you with today.
If the global strategy is to squeeze these regions until they fix themselves, but the result is populations too poor to eat, and the hardening of radical regimes, are we squeezing the pressure valves until it breaks the wrong way?
Are we engineering a solution or just a bigger explosion? That is the question for 2026.
It certainly is. And looking at the map today, the needle is moving dangerously close to the red.
Something for you to think about as you head into the weekend. Keep watching that split screen, stay curious, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.
Goodbye, everyone.
RRF Caserta. South Italy in English language.